What is up, everybody? Welcome back once again to Hot Toys Hotline. As always, if you're new here, please consider subscribing to the channel and drop a like on this video. I would very much appreciate it. Well, I have another review for you all today, and as you can see, this is a third-party figure, but this is the Petroleum Man by Black 8 Studio, 1/6 scale collectible figure, as you can see. Of course, this is Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood, one of my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis films of all time, really one of my favorite films of all time. So I'm really excited to check this out. I don't have any iterations of this character whatsoever currently in my collection. So, of course, as always, guys, let's take a quick tour around the box. As you can see, we have an image there of Daniel with his hat on, the covered in oil look, which this figure is based off of, and then just a normal stern look right there. We have a shot of him standing in front of that oil rig there, the Petroleum Man font with the Black 8 Studio logo, and as I mentioned, it says 1/6 scale collectible figure there on the bottom. Moving it around to the side, we do have the Black 8 logo once again. Towards the bottom, it does say Petroleum Man. On the other side, we basically just have the same thing mirrored there with the Black 8 logo. And then around the back, we do have a very interesting, devilish looking image here of Daniel Plainview. I don't know what's going on there, but definitely really interesting for sure. I do like the aesthetic of this box art. And of course, we do have our warning text down the bottom here. If anyone cares to read that, of course, you could pause the video. But guys, of course, now as always, let's take the foam insert out of the packaging and we'll take a closer look at how it arrives to you when it lands on your doorstep. Okay, now believe it or not, here it is. This is the foam insert taken out of the packaging. As you can see, we have everything nestled here in the foam. But guys, now as always, let me take the figure and all of the accessories out of the packaging and we'll take a closer look at all of the details. And really quickly, I just wanted to show you all of the accessories removed from the packaging, but now let's take a look at each one individually. Uh-oh. Do you guys hear that? Yes, guys, unfortunately with this one, we did only get 4 extra replacement hands. Of course, there are 2 hands pre-installed on the figure, and you'll see those later. But guys, you know my rule of thumb, there has to be a bare minimum of 8 hands for it to be acceptable to me, because I feel you are just more limited when you have less hands included with the figure. But with that being said, guys, I think these are really nicely painted. Of course, this version of Daniel, he's completely covered in oil when the oil well erupts. And as you can see, there is no shortage of that oil-looking paint on these hands. I think these are really nicely done. I do believe this has a lifelike look of having oil covered on the hands. I think they did a pretty good job on these. Again, I would just like to see more. Next, we do have our display stand. As you can see, it just says Petroleum Man, and it has the handprint on it. Nothing super exciting about this in my personal opinion. However, I think overall it looks pretty okay. I will say a lot of these third-party figures, they tend to get like debris under the sticker before they put the sticker on the display base. As you can see, there's a few lumps here and there. Definitely pretty interesting that that happens so often with all these different companies, at least in my experience. Of course, as always, guys, this does include a crotch grabber. I do not have it installed right now, but I just wanted to show you that that was included. Next, I know either you got this in or you saw it in my video, like what the hell is that? This is actually a dirty handkerchief that he uses to wipe his hands. If you look at the promotional photos, you'll see it in the promotional photos. Otherwise, you probably didn't know what this was because it's just in a piece of plastic inside the box. But that's what that is. It does crumble very nicely, as you can see. But it does look pretty convincing, in my opinion, like it has a bit of oil on it. Could it be a bit more dirty? Absolutely. But of course, that's something that you could do if you want to beef that up in your personal collection. Next, I almost have a bit of deja vu after just reviewing the Cunning Killer figure by Present Toys that also came with a pipe. But of course, Daniel Plainview has to come with a pipe as well. So as you can see, it's a very small accessory. I'll back my hand out so you can see how small it really is. But this is Daniel Plainview's pipe. Next, the best accessory in my opinion, apart from that extra head sculpt, this is the camp chair that he comes with. Now this is really cool because it does open up like a real camp chair. As you can see, we do have very similar weathering like we have on that handkerchief that he comes with. But as you can see, this is real wood and there are real metal screws there, which is pretty cool. It articulates pretty well. Again, it does a good job at replicating a real camp chair here. And overall, I think this is pretty nicely done. I'm very excited about this accessory. I'm definitely going to have my Daniel Plainview or my Petroleum Man displayed sitting in this. So definitely really cool and a nice job on this in my opinion. And overall, I think it's really nicely done. A bit of a chip there on the paint, but that's nothing I can't very easily touch up. So very cool accessory indeed. And finally, I almost hate to call this an accessory, but we have that alternate head sculpt. Now, the interesting thing about this head sculpt, guys, is this isn't really accurate to the scene that this figure is depicting. This is actually the look on his face towards the end in the bowling alley scene when he bashes Eli's head in with that bowling pin. So not sure why this was included with this figure. However, I do still think this is a great opportunity to use this sculpt for a kit bash and kind of put him in that sweater that he was wearing and everything. This is definitely really cool. And overall, I think it's very nicely done. I'm sure that these head sculpts are recast from another custom maker. That happens very often with these third-party figures. But overall, I think it's pretty nicely done in terms of the paint apps. Are they top tier? Absolutely not. Have I seen better third-party paint apps? Yes. However, I think it's pretty decent overall. You do have some gloss in the mouth there. As you can see as I move the camera, there is some gloss in the mouth. The teeth are actually pretty nicely painted. You don't often see that. Oftentimes it's pretty sloppily done. And you do have gloss on the eyeballs as well. I know I say eyeballs, but yes, you can barely see, but the eyeball is slightly open there on the right side. But overall, guys, I think it's pretty nicely done. Taking a look at the hair, the paint apps are pretty flat. But overall, again, I'm very happy with it. It's weird that they included this based on the scene that this is depicting. However, I'm not complaining because I honestly really want to use this for an alternate kit bash or something like that. But with that being said, guys, now let's take the figure out and let's take a look at the Petroleum Man by Black 8 Studio and see what we think. Okay, and here we are with the Petroleum Man by Black 8 Studios. Now, guys, I want to give you a quick look at the proportions on the body because I do want to point something out as we're talking about this. But, guys, I do think the body that they use for this figure in terms of the proportions is just a little bit off. As you can see, this kind of vest that he's wearing here looks a little puffy in the back. Now, you can pull it down if you want to. I want to find a way to better secure that down. But it just looks a little bit boxy there in the back in terms of the proportions. And as you can see, as I turn it, you could really see what I'm talking about. It's just a little loose there. Does it look terrible? Absolutely not. But I do think the proportions are just a little bit off with this body that they used. But now, let's get a close-up of that head sculpt, guys, because I know a lot of people are very curious about that. I'll get even closer here. As you can see, it's actually a pretty good likeness, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm sure this is a recast from an actual custom sculpt, but overall, I do think it's a pretty good looking sculpt. Now, I know a lot of people were curious about the oil slick on his face. Honestly, compared to the prototype, this does look way less natural in terms of how it's painted on. As you could see, it almost looks like you could tell that somebody just took a thin bristle paintbrush and painted that on. Is it terrible? Absolutely not. Is it relatively convincing from far back? Yes, but when you get up close like this, you can really see what I'm talking about. But apart from that, guys, I do think it's painted pretty decently. I really don't have any complaints about that. The hair and the mustache color is consistent. I do like that 5 o'clock shadow, kind of hidden among all the oil and stuff on his face. I do think that looks pretty decent. My main complaint about this head sculpt, guys, and I don't know if you could tell on camera, but in person it comes off differently. I feel like the forehead in the middle is a little too thick. It's like pointed out a little too much. Maybe you could see it from the side. The brow is a bit too strong. It almost has like a caveman, like nomad-y look from the side. And I tried to look at the prototype photos, and it doesn't look like that in the prototype photos. So, not really sure why it's coming off that way. Again, guys, I do like this sculpt, but I do think that brow is just a little bit strong depending on the angle you look at. But overall, guys, I do think the sculpt looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it, especially for the price of this figure. I really can't complain much. I do just, again, want to point out, I do think the oil on his face looks a bit less natural than it did on the prototype. But let's take a look at the clothing and see how that looks. Overall, guys, I'm pretty happy with how the clothing looks. Of course, this is just his normal clothes, just covered in oil as the oil well erupted. This looks really nice in my opinion. I think it's nicely done. I think it has a definitely convincing look to it. Does it have that wet look like it has in the movies? Of course not. Could they have achieved that? I'm sure they could have. However, I'm not going to complain about it. You do have a real metal chain here attached to the vest. I think that looks pretty good, and I definitely think that's a nice touch, and you can see it's coming out of the pocket there. Moving down, guys, again, really nice work done here on the body. I did mention earlier I would show you the hands pre-installed on the figure, and as you can see, we do have two open, relaxed hands that are also covered in that oil. As you could see, really nicely done though, guys. Moving around to the back, again, the oil effect is very convincing. I think overall the tailoring is pretty decent. I do think though it could be a little bit closer to the body. I think the proportions being thrown a bit off are really not only down to the tailoring on the clothing, could be a little bit tighter, but also again the body they use. Moving down though, guys, again, I do love how this looks. Overall, really no complaints about that. Taking a look at the boots, as you can see, nicely sculpted. I do like the dirt effect that they did there with all the oil and dirt and debris on his boots there. I think that looks pretty nice. Moving down to the bottom, as you can see on the soles here, they spared no expense on the weathering with the oil and such. I think this looks really nice overall. But in terms of the articulation, guys, and this is very important, but really quickly though, let's take a look at the head articulation. You really have no restrictions there in terms of how much you could pose it. No complaints about that personally. But what I did notice just taking it out of the box and messing around with it, the shoulders definitely feel very cheap. Overall, guys, this body is pretty bad. So this is definitely one of those body swap contenders. But taking a look at the shoulder, I'll try to be quiet to see if it'll do it again on camera. Can't really hear it, but it does kind of like crackle and pop as you pose it up. So definitely not a very exciting thing when you talk about quality of a body. But it does definitely go to full 90. I have no complaints about that. So in terms of the ability to pose, it certainly can pose. But I do worry that this body is going to loosen up over time because the body really is that cheap. In terms of moving the arms forward, no restrictions at all. I'm not feeling any restriction from the clothing there, so that's good. Putting the arms back down. Taking a look at that elbow bend, you do have double jointed elbows. Of course, you could do that, and you can also swivel to the side with no issues. But again, it does feel very loose in all of those areas, so definitely keep that in mind. And of course, with the hands, guys, you do get full 360 rotation, and you do have a rocker ball joint here, so you can move those in those directions if you want to. Now, of course, the abdominal crunch should not be limited at all, and it's not. Definitely really nice to see. We might as well take a look at the hip articulation here. A bit more restricted than I would like to see, but it's really not bad. You can push it up as far as you would want it to. Of course, this is important because this figure does come with that camping chair. I do think he will sit just fine, as you can see, because he is at a full 90 there. Putting the legs back down. I honestly think these knee joints are the tightest joints on the figure. Unfortunately, they do only go to 90. They don't go beyond that, so definitely keep that in mind. Again, guys, the body is not great. It's actually one of the least favorable third-party bodies I looked at recently in my videos. But finally, guys, taking a look at the boot articulation, you can get full rotation out of these, no issues there. But of course, because this is fully sculpted, you will not be able to rock it much up and down. You can get a little bit, but not much. So with that being said, guys, now let me take the figure and throw him in a couple poses, and I'll close out this video and share my final thoughts. Well, in conclusion, this was certainly an interesting figure for sure. I do think there are some strong points with this figure. As I said earlier in the review, I really do like the head sculpts despite minor discrepancies with them. I think the clothing is well done. However, I do think the body choice really wasn't the best choice for this. It definitely throws off the proportions a little bit. I will be looking at doing a body swap on this one, but overall, I am pretty happy with this figure, especially for the price tag of about 160 US dollars. But that's all I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I'm out.